Let me tell you a tale that of Aggro some would deem unfair. Our story begins as a new era began. The island is here, the people said with a cheer. But as the meta moved on, people caught on that Sapphire had become monstrously unfair. But a few champions stood in the rubble of the new, and Aggro stood proudly there. We do not care, for you are greedy, and turn one popsicle is not exceedingly rare. Your greed will be punished, and we will persist. But the name of Haram and Bel as his guide whispered through the realm, one of them must die. Haram, Haram, down with the rat. His jaw is unfair and items too quick. And so Haram was banished with only a spear for protection, and Aggro the champion could only watch. Like lightning control was back, and steel and singers were found everywhere. Aggro, who stood in the face of Haram, was cast back down to what it once was. Now only a shadow remains of the name Amber Amethyst Midrange. Okay, welcome to set 7 Aggro. I won't cover Amethyst Amber Midrange because that isn't a deck I'm playtested in, and that's not the deck this video is about. Here is my deck that I had made for set 7. Only change was Honey Marin from set 6 to, you know, replace Piglet finally with a very solid card. And then there is also this list that had done well in a tournament, even post Haram bans, but as control crept back into the cracks of the meta, this list I find is also starting to struggle as well. They are fairly similar, but this one has the show me more and the 2 cost with 3 lore game plan, whereas mine is just sort of the very straightforward I am going to be questing as best as I can game plan. If this is your first time with Amethyst Amber Aggro, the deck is very simple. It was the fastest? No, there's faster aggro decks out there, but it was probably the most resilient aggro deck that exists just because you have enough tricks with stuff like Pascal having evasive, and then Daisy Duck being able to quest very safely with her 1/4 stat line, and then you just build in the rest with things such as Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, Merlin, the White Rose, Honey Marin, and Baloo to protect your cards and then finish off the game with these lore characters that generate a lore on entry. This deck was actually doing really well. If you've been keeping up with the gameplay series, you will know that I had gone undefeated for the first 5 weeks of my matches using this exact deck. And it's not like I was just facing weaker decks. I had faced Blurple, Amethyst Ruby, and then Sapphire Steel before the Haram bans, and I won them all. Always involves some amount of luck with Hyper Aggro, but I got lucky. For that though, I forgot to shill in this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. There's coaching in my Metafy, then my Twitch and my Discord are both in description. Back to the video. Of course, now though, in order to get the same performance I had in those first 5 weeks of the Lorcana League as run by Knights of Lorcana, pretty chill guy, you should go check out his channel. It's been a bit of a struggle. There's just Amber Steel running around everywhere, and my last 2 weeks haven't been so stellar, but I'll get into that once I upload that video, which should be coming soon. I don't really have a whole ton else to do other than upload the video, so you'll see it after this one. But hyper aggro itself does still persist. There's my evasive aggro deck that also is kind of just an amethyst mid-range package, but it is able to quest highly aggressively using characters such as Pegasus and Pascal using their evasive nature to get by a lot of the early game characters. What is this is oh, this is the wrong version of Pax Evasion. I was like, my version doesn't run the Shift Diablo. Instead, it runs the Merlin Rabbit because Shift Diablo in the deck didn't make a whole ton of sense due to it taking a while for him to go card positive, and there wasn't enough criticality of actions in order for him to be useful. But of course, one of the decks that's popped up recently is this control variant of this Amethyst Emerald evasive mid-range package shenanigans stuff, except with the discard package here. And like discard package, there are discard cards in here, but most of the point of the discard is just to gain like 1 or 2 inches on your opponent in order to win the game through a match of attrition. My deck, the evasive or tax evasion, is much more focused on just outvaluing your opponent with the standard amethyst plays. And people have now finally discovered this Peter Pan Iago combo, or at the very least, it's now being run more and more frequently in decks, which has been very fun to see. So yeah, the other version of aggro that very much still is persisting is Amethyst Steel. Once again, Amethyst shenanigans with Steel, but this is an outdated list as well. This was before the Haram ban, but let's just go to popular. One should pop up pretty quickly. There we go. It's definitely not the same as the Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro deck, but it has a lot of the same elements still there, just wanting to try and gain lore very aggressively in your opponent's face with high value characters. The only difference is that now it's not just focused on high lore efficiency, it's focused more on high character value to gain lore efficiency, you know? And then just running Strength of a Raging Fire is always good in a deck that can run it. So, certainly a strong deck. Why is this version costing $276? Is it literally just because, okay, it's literally just because of Genie and Strength of a Raging Fire. Oh, and Doc. I forgot how expensive Doc has gone, as well as Calhoun. I should have gotten my Calhoun's way sooner. Then the final sort of aggro deck that has persisted is Chernadog. It's certainly not as strong as it once was, but it still is persisting in the meta. This isn't a good list of Chernadog, but this was just me throwing together the Chernadog base in order for me to know what cards I needed to collect, which I think I have all of them except Rapunzel now, so that's fun. I can just run this at my locals and bully them with it. So yeah, hyper aggro still hyper aggro still exists, but hyper aggro as an archetype has just slowly been bullied out more and more from the meta until we've now reached this point where the only ways for aggro decks to persist is to have these sort of value mid range lines that exist within it as they continue questing aggressively. So that's the state of Amethyst Amber now. Kind of tragic that it's just been bullied out of the meta, but what can you do? That happens in card games from time to time, and it was a long time coming. The signs were there. Like, Control has just slowly been picking more and more steam up as sets get released and they gain more and more tools. It's still not like an oppressive strategy, of course, but it's really just a matchup between mid range and control right now in the meta. And aggro exists in more of the mid range space rather than in this hyper aggro range. So I will leave it at that. There's certainly, oh, wait, one more card to talk about. Flat, flat. What about bare necessities? It doesn't help. I wish it did. I cross my heart I would be running 4 copies of it in all of my aggro decks if the bare necessities provided enough value in order to beat these matchups. The problem with the bare necessities is that if you aren't singing it with a 2 cost, then you're going to be falling behind in establishing characters as a hyper aggro player, and that is not something hyper aggro is exactly um should be doing. So if you have to play bare necessities just raw, then you really start to struggle. That's why you're starting to see most of the decks that persist are aggro based are either in Emerald in some form or Amethyst. Because Amethyst mid range has just so much value engines that it doesn't care about the songs or actions your opponent plays, or if it does care about the songs and actions your opponent plays, you have ways of sniping them out with Ursula. But that will be it. There's probably some version of the deck that still works. I need to move on to greener pastures. Hyper aggro has served its purpose in my Lorcana career, and if it ever becomes good again, I will be one of the first to return to it and play it again, so long as it's not prohibitively expensive. That was always the big draw of the deck, only being $96 in a world filled with Calhouns and dogs who are now costing $20. I remember when I called when you should buy dogs back when he was only $3. Oh, I'm so happy I have my playset of him before that. But anyways, that's gonna be it from me. I hope to catch you all in the next video, and I hope to see you all next time.